Hey everyone, welcome back to The Explainer. Today we're opening up what is basically the ultimate toolkit for becoming a master data detective. Whether you're running a business, doing academic research, or honestly just trying to survive the sheer overwhelming volume of information we're hit with every single day, knowing how to actually analyze data, that's your superpower. We're going to break down the 10 distinct types of data analysis that every researcher and really every modern professional absolutely needs to know. Get ready because this is going to completely change the way you look at numbers. But first, we really have to ask ourselves one massive question. How do we actually make sense of all this endless data? We're living in an era of total information overload. And to frame our investigation today, let's look at a specific mystery. Have you ever wondered why market trends shift so incredibly fast? Seriously, almost overnight. One day, a product is literally everywhere, and the next day, poof, completely forgotten. Well, the answer to why these trends shift so rapidly is hiding right there in the data. Consumer feedback loops are shorter and way more explosive than they've ever been. But here's the catch. Raw data on its own is just noise. To figure out the why and, more importantly, the what next, we've got to have the right tools. So let's get right into it. We've put together a complete map of the 10 data analysis types we're going to conquer today. I know, at first glance, seeing everything from descriptive all the way down to multivariate analysis looks like a lot to take in. But don't stress about memorizing this all at once. We're going to take this giant list and transform it into a really logical step-by-step journey. Just think of this as the master blueprint for our data detective agency. To keep things simple and avoid cognitive overload, we've broken our roadmap down into 4 distinct phases. 1. Understanding the past. 2. Predicting the future. 3. Numbers versus narratives. And 4. Simple to complex variables. All right, kicking things off with phase 1, understanding the past. This is where we look back at what happened and why. The absolute baseline for all of this is descriptive analysis. The definition is super straightforward. It's basically the process of summarizing past data to understand exactly what has happened. Think of it like reading the morning newspaper or just glancing at your daily dashboard. It is not going to tell you why your sales dropped or why a certain social media trend suddenly went viral. It just tells you that it did. It gives you the what. So how do we actually build that baseline? We use a few very specific components. We've got frequency analysis to see how often something happened. We use measures of central tendency, your mean, median, and mode, to figure out the typical behavior. Then, measures of dispersion show us how spread out our data really is. And naturally, data visualization and summary statistics help us package all these facts up so we can quickly digest them. Look, if consumer demand suddenly pivots, descriptive analysis is the very first alarm bell that goes off. It shows us that initial spike or that sudden drop. But hey, just knowing what happened, that's not going to cut it. We have to transition away from those surface-level facts and take a real deep dive. This is where we pull out 2 very specific, very powerful tools: exploratory data analysis and diagnostic analysis. These are what we use to uncover the hidden patterns and the actual root causes of our data mysteries. Exploratory data analysis, or EDA, is basically our sandbox. Before we make any rigid assumptions about what our data means, we just explore. We look for patterns, we run distribution analysis, and crucially, this is a big one, we look for outliers. When a viral product explodes out of nowhere, those earliest signals are almost always outliers. They're these strange little anomalies in the data that just don't fit the normal pattern. EDA helps us spot those sneaky outliers long before they become the new normal. Now, once we've explored the data, we move right into diagnostic analysis. This is where we actually solve the mystery. Diagnostic analysis answers the why. Like, why did that specific product category suddenly lose traction overnight? Well, we use root cause analysis to dig down into the foundation. We use trend and correlation analysis to see if 2 completely distinct variables are actually moving together. For example, did a massive spike in a specific influencer's posts directly correlate with our sudden inventory shortage? We analyze the variance, interpret all that data, and boom, suddenly the past makes complete sense. Moving right along to phase 2, predicting the future. This is where we shift from hindsight to foresight. The bridge connecting us to that future is inferential analysis. You see, we rarely, if ever, have data on every single customer or every single transaction in the world. It's just not possible. Instead, we have to take a sample. Inferential analysis lets us take a small sample and confidently generalize our findings to a much wider population. We use specific sampling techniques to get a representative group. Then we use hypothesis testing, calculate confidence intervals, and run p-value analysis just to make sure our findings aren't a complete fluke. If we spot a sudden behavioral shift in a tiny test group, inferential analysis tells us if we can expect that exact same behavior to explode on a national scale. Once we can infer those broader truths, we take a 1-2 punch approach to the future. Step 1 is predictive analysis, predicting what happens next using heavy hitters like regression, machine learning, forecasting, and classification. But Step 2 takes it to a whole other level with prescriptive analysis, prescribing exactly what you should do about it. Think of it this way. Predictive analysis is like a weather forecast telling you a massive storm is coming. Prescriptive analysis, that's your GPS giving you proactive route recommendations to avoid the storm altogether using optimization, simulation, and what-if analysis. If you're a company trying to stay ahead of rapidly shifting market trends, this is literally your ultimate weapon. All right, on to phase 3, numbers versus narratives, getting a handle on the actual nature of your evidence. This comparison is an absolute classic. On one hand, we've got qualitative analysis. This is all about non-numerical data. We're talking interviews, reviews, social media comments. We use thematic and content analysis, coding and interpretation to find the deep meaning behind the words. On the other hand, we have quantitative analysis, which relies strictly on the numbers, statistical testing, data modeling, measurement. Look, if consumer sentiment is pivoting rapidly, quantitative analysis tells you exactly how much your sales dropped in 24 hours. But qualitative analysis, reading the actual customer reviews, that tells you the human sentiment and the emotional narrative driving that drop. Honestly, to really understand what's happening, you almost always need both. And that brings us to phase 4, simple to complex variables. This is all about scaling your investigation. The simplest form of investigation you can do is univariate analysis. Uni literally meaning one. You are effectively isolating and studying just one single variable at a time. You're looking at its frequency distribution, central tendency, and dispersion. For instance, if you strictly want to analyze the age of your buyers and absolutely nothing else, you're doing univariate analysis to summarize that one specific slice of the pie. But let's be real, the world is rarely that simple, especially in a volatile market where consumer tastes can literally flip overnight. That's why we contrast univariate with the heavy lifting of multivariate analysis. This handles the messy complexity of multiple, overlapping factors all at the exact same time. We're talking advanced techniques like multiple regression, factor analysis, and MANOVA. This is how you figure out how a customer's age, income, geographic location, and browsing history all interact together simultaneously to predict their next purchase. It is incredibly complex, but man, it is powerful. So when you pull all this together, you essentially have a complete data detective toolkit. We've gone from the foundational facts of descriptive analysis, diving deep with exploratory and diagnostic methods, bridging to the broader world with inferential statistics, predicting and prescribing the future, balancing those qualitative narratives with quantitative numbers, all the way down to handling complex multivariate problems. These are definitely not just isolated academic buzzwords. They're 10 distinct lenses, and they fit together perfectly to help you clarify reality. So, as we wrap up today's explainer, I really want to leave you with a challenge. Think about the biggest problem you're trying to solve right now. Maybe you're trying to anticipate the next massive market shift before your competitors even see it coming. Look at the data you currently have. Which of these 10 specific analysis types are you going to deploy to drive your next big decision? The clues are out there. They're just waiting in the data. You just have to choose the right tool to uncover them. Keep learning, keep questioning the data, and we'll see you next time.